They were the kings of cover.
We would be singing a Men at Work song to 1,200 people, and Men at Work would be down the road to 600.
Now Channel 9 takes you backstage, behind the music, to hear the stories.
Not only did the people party in the venues, but the bands really party.
And learn the secrets of what really happened.
It's a way of life.
Pub Bands, Legends of Perth, with your host Dean Clares.
Welcome to a look back at a time in Perth's history when pub bands ruled the entertainment landscape. In the late 70s and 80s, they played popular favourites and original songs to a generation of fans in beer barns across the city. It was a music scene that created a pop culture phenomenon unlike anywhere else, and at a time when money was made and rules were broken. But where did the inspiration for all of this come from? Well, maybe it was a band called Fatty Lumpkin and a hit record that sounded something like this.
A Top Hat nightclub in those days was owned by Des Joes and Sharon Dawes, and Fatty Lumpkin was the headline act there regularly.
Now, Fatty Lumpkin appealed to me because I liked heavy metal, rock and roll.
The plan with Fatty Lumpkin really was, and the first lineup, we didn't play any covers at all. And this went well for a few weeks, and then we discovered this isn't going to work, you know, because crowds were dropping off. So in every set, we'd make sure we played a popular cover of the time, like Stairway to Heaven.
I remember seeing one of the earliest versions of Fatty Lumpkin and lost my mind.
I mean, we were working quite a lot, maybe 5 or 6 nights a week, and we needed to buy a concert PA. And I think we were probably the first band that did that.
Everybody in Perth knew who Fatty Lumpkin were because they were the sort of standout. They got the record company deal, and they were getting airplay on the radio, which is, you know, in those days was phenomenal for a Perth band.
I used to love going to see bands like Fatty Lumpkin, Bakery, Sitting Bull, because I learned so much from them.
A few years later, a suburban boy with a captivating personality stole the spotlight, and Dave Warner's fearless energy and razor-sharp wit turned the pub music scene upside down.
I wake up every morning with no one beside me. I wake up every morning, my mother will chide me. I'm just a suburban boy, just a suburban boy.
Dave Warner makes me laugh in the nicest possible way. Dave Warner wrote songs about suburbia, lived in suburbia, dominated suburbia for such a long period of time.
I came back from London around 75, 76, and the Beagle Boys were playing in the Victoria Hotel and had a good, solid crowd. And I thought this is the kind of crowd that would work for what I'd been working on in the year or so that I'd been away. So I started off in this kind of smallish venue, but it grew. And any Friday or Saturday night, there must have been 30 or 40 venues in Perth that were all probably at least 50% full, and loads of them, 108%.
I remember just peeping through the window at the Aussie Park and seeing Dave just spit on the ceiling, it's like all sweaty, and it was great, yeah.
And I know what it's like to be rejected every night, and I'm sure that it must be easier for boys from the city.
I think he's much more influential than he's ever given credit for, and he definitely influenced all of us.
Yeah, he was pretty full on. Really was. My father warned me about Aussies like him,
His shows were fantastic. Warner, sensational.
The fuse that Dave Warner lit set the music scene on fire, and Loaded Dice took the game to a whole new level.
We did well at the Civic. That's what sort of started that big break. We started from about 50 people to about 300, 400.
In a place designed for about 175.
Yeah.
With the pool table. And I remember going down for the sound check, and it was in the middle of the afternoon, and the crowd was all around the Civic Hotel all the way down to the Red Rooster shop. And gig time was miles away. I was already scared to death.
Loaded Dice were a phenomenon. The people would come in, the front row would go up and put their handbags and their drinks on the edge of the stage, just waiting for the band to walk on. And then the band would come on and explode.
It was all about the entertainment. It was about making sure that the people that came to see us had a great time and wanted to come back and watch us again.
You talk about influence. I didn't see Dick until after the fingerprints were well established, so I didn't steal all that stuff, Dick. But a unique entertainer right up there with Dave Warner.
I always reckon we gave value for money. You know, we always played, you know, played a long time, took short breaks, you know, and...
I would have liked to have watched this.
Soon a new sound started filling rooms as the Elks brought their own brand of funk and blues to the party.
I really liked the Elks. There was something very good about them. They were a little bit upset when we stole their Sunday session at the Charles, though.
Oh my God. We were just obsessed with the Elks.
They were slick, they were outstanding, and you knew that they were going to go on and become very successful.
I joined the Elks in '77. We were just packing out places left, right and centre.
We had a whole different dance style with the Elks to everybody else. There was... and Terry Serio was just such an amazing front man, and Dave Brewer on guitar. There was not much not to like.
It was a real luxury being able to play the music that you really loved and to have people coming to see you, you know, 6 or 7 nights a week. It was great.
We were just obsessed with them, loved them.
I'd just taken a year off uni, and my friend Boyd Wilson and I had not much to do, and we were like, let's form a band, make it a 60s band, because we loved that music.
We advertised and quickly got a drummer, and then we were out at our rehearsal place in Kelmscott, and along came in a train our guitarist, who was pretty wild.
And the Fingerprints was born.
We enlisted the help of a cricket mate of ours called Pinky Hayes, and he went out and got us a gig. And it was at the Mozzie Park Hotel.
The first show they ever did there, we had about 13 people there, and in the space of probably 5-6 weeks, we were closing the doors there, you know. It would have 350-400 people in this tiny room.
And we just couldn't believe what was happening.
Everybody had a favourite band or a favourite pub to go and watch. Every Saturday night we went down to the Windsor Hotel and watched the Fingerprints, and they would just pack them in. And Billy Bear on lead guitar, Boyd Wilson, they used to do awesome versions of all sorts of songs. So you had to get there early, line up, and we'd rock the night away.
It wasn't really about the music. You had to put on a good show, yes, but it was really about being able to stage the party in the right way.
My first inspiration of, the large PAs was when my then girlfriend dragged me to a Bob Dylan concert. She was hot for Bob Dylan, and I was totally inspired by the speaker system that was either side of the stage.
I can remember it like it was yesterday, the big PA. The first really big PA was at the Civic Hotel with loaded dice. And I just remember Dave, the drummer, hitting his floor toms, and the whole pub shook every time he whacked them.
I think there was a bit of a competition going on between all the cover bands who had the biggest rig.
We had a huge system. We had a bloody removal truck with all our gear in it.
As the bands got bigger and the rooms got bigger and the crowds got bigger, when you started playing in the big barns, you need to fill it up. So a couple of little M&R speakers on columns, didn't cut it anymore. So you end up with these big bins and big horns and the whole thing became a travelling concert. So bands had trucks, had road crew, had guitar tuners, bumpers, lighting operators, front of house operators. The whole thing was just a travelling sideshow.
Around about 1980, I reckon, is when the light shows got big. The PAs had got big beforehand, probably about when we were playing 78, around then. People started to get the 45-60s and then the double 45-60s. And Loaded Dice always had a pretty good system, and the Frames and Fingerprints.
The boys probably were the first band to have all the big flashing lights and the big light show. And then there was bands like the Jets who had huge PAs. They actually sort of based their whole sound on that huge, big sound.
Don't forget that Ice was in stereo.
I was going to say that Ice in stereo.
So we were probably the first band to play in stereo, and we're able to mix it so that when we played, and our drummer would go across the kit, that would spread across the room, so people could hear like they're hearing in a set of headphones.
And you'd see all the punters going.
I think the boys were the ones who sort of needed a big PA to
to play their music, but then it just got ridiculous. We were literally carting around concert production.
It was amazing how large some sound systems were that we put into some very small rooms. It was bloody loud, there's no question about it. So then the louder the better.
Coming up next, the teenagers that turned up the volume and stole the show.
On a regular basis, we're getting between 800 and 1,000 a night. The boys were huge. The boys were absolutely huge.
They were only teenagers, but they gave pub rock a new power and energy. The boys flicked the switch and the rock show exploded.
And the boys were huge. The boys were absolutely huge.
They had this power, this energy that, was amazing.
When they first started out, we just thought, this is the new Beatles, you know, these guys are so hot.
Understanding of each other's tragedy. You had eyes for him, I had eyes for her, we had eyes we couldn't see.
I think I was 18. Camilla was 14 when I joined. Yeah, I think Lino was a year older than that, or a couple of years. But yeah, it was a pretty hectic time working. Like, it was 4 or 5 gigs a week. So.
At the time, they had Fingerprints playing boppy, that was fine. It was great. A lot of girls loved it, but guys are grated on a bit. Whereas the boys were playing Angels, and they were doing really full-on rock, heavy pub rock.
The boys were the first group, if you like, that took a big PA system and a big light show. And they went to I think it was the Charles Hotel. The boys put on this rock show in a pub.
To see the boys play in the Dianella Hotel with a 400-can light show was pretty impressive.
Brent Lacanis, when he was the front man, you couldn't take your eyes off that guy. And those two guitarists, Lino and Camillo, they were just powerhouses.
And Paul McCarthy, who was a songwriter for the boys, he's as good as anything.
There was a period where we introduced new songs where I actually saw their crowd go down. Every time they took one of my songs on, their career took a dive, and it was sort of like, I'm the man who's going to destroy the most successful band in town. And it really sort of stayed that way until the single came out.
On a regular basis, we're getting between 800 and 1,000 a night.
And that's like 4 nights a week?
4 nights a week.
Yeah.
We were supporting them. We were in this crappy little band that got the support. When I finished the set, I went off and then Frank comes on and I said, mate, how do you play with those lights behind your head? And he just looked at me and said, that's rock and roll. And I went, oh, well, let's get started. That's it.
No arguing with that.
That's rock and roll.
It was a pop culture phenomenon no one in Australia, or maybe the world, had seen before or since. Cover bands were king, and the longer it lasted, the bigger it got.
It was a very vibrant music scene.
Anywhere from Wednesday to Sunday, the big form of entertainment for people was going to bands. That was right up there with the movies. And so it just became the norm. Everyone was like, well, we're meeting at the Dianella, or we're meeting at the Overflow, or the Shenton Park, or the Subiaco. And you could play in a little place like Perth, or relatively little place, 5 or 6 nights a week and make a real living out of it.
Count 20 bands, and the top 10 would have 800 to 1,000 people plus. Another 10 bands out of that would be getting 500 to 800 people, and there'd still be bands underneath that.
1 minute bands were playing to 20 and 30 people, then all of a sudden you had places like the Generator springing up and there's 1,500 people in there.
Yeah, a band that wasn't doing well was getting 350 people on a Saturday night.
Exactly.
That was a band that wasn't doing well.
There was a band a night. Every night we'd go and see a different band, and every night was packed.
Bands could attract 1,000 people from Thursday to Sunday, no matter where they went to play.
At the Overflow Hotel, I remember, there'd be 15, maybe 1,800 people in there. And still 400 or 500 people lined up trying to get in.
It was the full package. It was the next best thing to going to a big band concert, except it was about 1/10 of the price, and the fact that they were there every Saturday or every Friday night or every Thursday night or every Sunday session. It was massive.
There was no mobile phones, so everyone just met up at the pub. It was our social network.
I arrived in Perth in March 1980, but I really didn't know what Perth was about. So I got off the plane, checking our bags where we were staying, and a guy said, let's go and see the biggest band in Perth at the time. And I went, oh, this will be great. And we went to the Herdsman Hotel, and there was about 1,000, 1,100 people there, and the Fingerprints were playing. And Barron and Glenn were just standing there with their mouths open because they were playing Beatles songs and a few Elvis Presley numbers and Chuck Berry and just covers.
1976 is when they finished the Bitumen Highway to join us to the rest of the country. If you were a visiting band, you either had to fly a long, long way or drive thousands and thousands of miles, not even on a bitumen road. So people didn't come here. And so that's how the cover band circuit kind of grew up, because there was no other way you were going to get to see that music.
The cover scene was huge in Perth because I think the actual cover bands that performed were unique. They were actually original in their own way. I think there's a misconception that being a cover band means that you just play covers. Unless you put your own personality into those songs, it's going to be just that song.
When we sort of toured over the East, we realised that even the bigger bands were struggling over there and were getting nowhere near the crowds that we were getting here in Perth. And we were just so isolated in Perth and didn't realise, what was going on. But it was. There's no doubt it was just massive.
And we were playing their songs.
Yeah. It's true, that we would be playing at the Overflow, singing a Men at Work song to 1,200 people, and Men at Work would be down the road to 600 people. At a venue, that's a true story,
The biggest one was X-Men, Uncanny
X-Men, yeah.
Because I don't know what they were at some pub. They might have been the Florian or something, and there was 300 people there, and we were up the road at the Overflow with 1,200 people. And I invited Brian actually to come down and sing with us, and I think he was a bit sort of, whoa.
Well, he was shocked. He said, how long has this been going on? Looked out at the crowd, singing one of his songs. So it was
weird.
Hard to explain how it happened or why it happened, but it was definitely real,
It was a way of life, but it didn't last forever. It was there, but gee, while it was going, it was all right,
The Fingerprints, Frames, Loaded Dice, those sort of acts, you walk in there and feel good. Just feel great.
The Perth scene was like a microcosm of the stereotypical rock, cliche that we all know about. And yeah, you had all the characters from, what's that film, Almost Famous? Not only did the people party in the venues, but the bands really partied a lot after the gig.
It was a real exciting time. It really was. And if you were on the Ferris wheel, you really didn't want to get off.
Coming up, how the Frames changed the game and why the 80s was so incredible.
80s scene in Perth, pubs, was the best. Music in the 80s and live bands in the 80s. If you weren't there, you missed out.
It was the 80s, and a new wave of bands were filling the pubs. At the start of the decade, it was the Riffs who got it all going.
The band we formed when we first got here was the Riffs, and it was a sort of a power pop band. It was Glenn on guitar, me playing bass, Barry Litton on drums, and the very irrepressible Mick O'Hara on lead vocals. And the guy was just magic on stage. People loved him. We did a lot of originals, but a lot of very obscure covers, songs from the Only Ones, very early Joe Jackson numbers.
That's a band we would go see. Absolutely. But they were very different, and when they did their own songs, it sat in with what they were doing, but no, they were great.
Yeah, the Riffs were very different, and we got a lot of people in.
The Riffs were hot, but the Frames exploded onto the scene and soon became the hottest property in town, smashing records and changing the way the game was played.
Max and Clint and Tim, they were in a band, and they were friends with the manager of the Carron Up Tavern.
He wanted a band put together for his Saturday nights. He knew I was a guitar player. Of course, at that stage, any excuse to get a guaranteed gig in a pub was like, yes, please.
They put an ad in the paper, I answered it, Mark answered it.
And through that ad in the Sunday Times, we got together and formed a band called The News. And we did a few gigs until Des Joe saw us and came down with a cigar and said, come and join us and we'll make you famous. And changed our name.
And that's how it started.
didn't happen overnight. I mean, it took about 12 months, which I suppose is not that long when you think about it, but we were working 6 nights a week up to a point.
I used to go and watch the frames.
Always.
And every Saturday night we'd go down there trying to pick up chicks off the frames.
Dean Denton, great professional, great singer, best voice in my opinion. He could sing anything, and a great entertainer. He and the Frames just delivered every single time they got up and performed.
Of course, the Frames became very, very famous. Probably, I'd say, the most famous cover band WA's ever had, because they sounded just like the records.
They were phenomenal, unbelievable. You know, to do the amount of people they did week in, week out, people would line up. We'd have people at the Nook and Burrow on a Saturday night. The place would be full and there'd be 400 people outside.
Generally, there was this little thing you could see. There was a 2-year rise and fall of bands, you know, and we'd done our 2-year thing and we got a little bit shaky, but we changed directions. We added a sax player, and for whatever reason, we kept sustaining, and we ended up having 4 good years.
The real perception changed when we were told to go and buy all sports cars, because up until that point, I reckon still, most people thought that musicians were struggling to make a living, you know, pay the rent. And all of a sudden, we had these sports cars, and I think perception changed very quickly. And the other musicians as well suddenly saw, wow, this is possible, to make a decent living out of doing this stuff.
We wanted their success.
Yeah, and
they had sports cars and we never had sports cars.
Yeah, they had little RX-7. We had all powerhouses. We had V8s.
We were actually sponsored by an airline, which was TAA back in the day, and by Pepsi at the same time. And we were actually sponsored by Pepsi before Michael Jackson. So there you go.
To be honest with you, it was the best times of our lives.
It was the best time.
It was the best times of our lives.
And we had a lot of things that fell right for us. And and that
few
probably
things went a bit wobbly, but
yeah. But in general, it's been great, and we're still doing it. I mean, we're still playing once a year, or twice a year, or 3 times a year, whatever, with the same 5 guys. So can't have done too much wrong.
Exactly.
While this was all happening, a new band emerged with a female frontline and a unique pop sound. Seal and the Beam put girl power into the pubs.
There wasn't a lot of girls in the music industry, but the ones that were there, I can remember, you know, Seal and the Beam. They were a great band.
We tried not to do anything we didn't, that somebody in the band didn't like, because we still wanted to enjoy it. I thought, if I'm not enjoying it, if this is like a job, because I used to work at a bank, if this is like a job, I don't want to do it anymore. So it always had to be fun, and it was. It was like a party.
The artists back in the 80s were varied, but the girls were strong. And Seal and the Beam would get out and punch as strongly as the blokes.
We started doing fairly obscure English pop, and we played at the Albion, Steve's, Mozzie Park, had a little following. But then one day Celia and Mike decided we're going to do Top 40 because we want to make some money. And so we branched out and we just went through the roof with our Top 40. Just went crazy. We still kind of kept it fairly English and poppy, but we did a lot of Australian stuff. We did the vinyls, that was huge.
Lisa definitely got influenced by Chrissy Amphlett. She was, you could hear it in her voice and the way she phrased some of her songs. And I remember seeing Lisa and thinking, wow, she's awesome. And then Lisa became her own thing, you know.
Seal and the Beam, I reckon, could have been huge. It would have been ABBA with an edge. They were amazing.
They were really brave girls, you know, getting up there doing things that there was not a lot else out there doing it, certainly not in Perth.
We knew that we were girls on stage and we were hoping that that was appealing. We tried not to be too, I don't know, sexy. Celia hated the idea of being called sexy. I mean, you know, we probably were pretty sexy back then.
Coming up, the band that got its name from a car and became the biggest act of them all.
You'd have 500 girls screaming, but you'd have 500 blokes at the back doing this to you, you know, because they just hated us.
The timing of V Capri was almost perfect to sort of
slot them straight in after us.
Over the top of us.
And V Capri was put together during a period in the early 80s and lasted about 6 years. In my opinion, it was one of the most successful bands we'd ever put together in Perth. It was planned. It wasn't just a shot in the dark. It was really sat down and we thought about it.
Yeah, we only had a week to come up with a name too. And there's always this thing about where did the name come from. Mick was taking me down to I think it was the 80's. God, and we were saying, you know, with the rabbits, we're going to be called the trees. And then this car went past. It was a Ford Capri. And Mick goes, what about Capri? And I go, the Capri. And I think he must have said something like, why call it the when you can call it V? There's nothing with the name other than sheer desperation in the end.
As a group, they knitted, and it showed. I mean, it was contagious, just like a good music act is.
Des was our manager at the time at the Rock Exchange, and Des would say, I want you to go down Saturday night to the 80's or the Overflow. I want you to write down every song that the Frames play, and I need you to go and learn those songs, and then we're going to go bang out and we're going to take on the Frames and take all their crowd away. And I remember we went, we don't want to do those songs, that's not us. We knew that we had to establish ourselves as a slightly different band. So we focused in, if you like, V Capri focused in on, at that stage, In Excess, Midnight Oil, The Cars, and U2. And that was sort of our core. And fortunately for us, those bands went nuts.
We learned very quickly that a crowd brings a crowd. It was within about 3 weeks, we had the Florida Hotel absolutely chock-a-block on a Thursday night. We went something like from 80 people, 300 people, boom, 800 people.
They were great. They were a terrific band. In fact, they shot their first film clip, You're Haunting Me, in my house in North Perth.
We were working 4 nights a week, rehearsing 2 days a week, and then on another day, say a Friday, we put it to schools and we'd go out and do a half-hour lunchtime concert. And we did that for about 3 or 4 months, and then bang, released a single, straight to #1 on the local charts.
Pub goers don't buy singles, but young girls do. So we used to go in there, and not only would we do the gig, you'd have 500 girls screaming, but you'd have 500 blokes at the back doing this to you know, because they just hated us.
Yeah, the V Capri thing was quick, it was big, and it was hard, and you couldn't avoid it. You either loved them or you hated them. There's no middle ground.
Oh, I reckon they were a great band for what they were doing. One of those bands in that culture, in that time, that sort of put Perth on the map a bit.
And I think the fact that we did a lot of film clips and we did a lot of advertising and we're on, you know, a Peel-a-thon, we did that many a time. And when you play that with songs on the radio and you've got the kids at the school, I think we played to a wider range of people with a heavy image, and I think the success of that is what makes the band appear to be bigger than what we really are, actually.
They did it extremely well.
While the bands were flying and the pubs were rocking, behind the scenes it was the backstage and front of house crews that were making it happen with a style and a character all of their own.
The great thing about the roadies is that they all had nicknames. And most of the nicknames were animals. There was Fish, Panther.
Pig.
There was Pig. So I remember once we had a gig at the Royal Perth Yacht Club, and we were inside, and a gentleman came up to us, and our roadie had arrived eventually, and he said, "Mr. Pig is here to see you."
It was important to have a crew that you could rely on, and we certainly did there. You know, for a while we were able to pay to get good people, so we did, and it was great to just have that comfort of knowing that sort of side of it was looked after.
They were so important. They worked harder than the bands and got no credit for it.
We took pride in doing our thing and making sure they weren't really aware of it. Their business was with management and on stage. Our business was making sure they could do that stuff.
You're playing to 1,000 to 1,200 people every night, and the whole system has to go to the next venue on the next day. Yeah, you needed a great crew, and you did look after them.
Every band had their own PA and truck and road crew. Jets at one stage had 11 people working for us that were full-time crew, and they'd start early in the afternoon and work until the early hours of the morning. They'd set up all through the afternoon, be there for the gig during the night, and pull down and sometimes get home at 3 in the morning.
It was pretty common for us to do about a 13-hour day, and when they were promoting records, we would build school shows from 8 a.m. in the morning, and then we'd be loading into rooms like this at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and be finished there by 4 o'clock in the morning if it was 2 a.m. licensing like America's Cup, and be back at it at 8. And now that sometimes went on for months on end.
We did feel in control. In the venues itself, we used to tell the publican where we wanted to set our stuff up, the front of house desk and all the rest of it. That doesn't happen today.
When you're in the band, you're working hard. When you're in the crew, you're working harder. And I often would ask myself who was in control. There was one or two particular people, generally called door girls. Capital D, capital G, the door girls would control the door. You'd pay to get in. And then when it was full house, you didn't get in unless, perhaps, you knew the door girl.
I was at the right place at the right time. I didn't have any music connections. I didn't have any band knowing people or knowledge or anything. I literally happened to be at the right place at the right time and just...
It was a good place.
Got in. It was a good time. Yeah, absolutely.
But it wasn't like work. It was never like work.
There was a lot of cash being handed over. So there was a situation where someone, if they wanted to, could take advantage of that.
Oh, you had to be honest. Number one.
And friendly.
A couple of legendary girls, door girls, were Bryce, who was with Loaded Dice, and Pascal. They were just phenomenal. And what they were really good at is telling at a glance, like the merest glance, whether you had forged that stamp.
I didn't look at their faces. It was like money, money.
Yeah, you did the money, I did the stamping and counting.
Didn't have a chance to look at their face.
Yep.
At sometimes.
If you didn't have good door staff, what could that cost you in a week?
Coming up, the bands that made us feel good and kept the crowds coming.
But one happened to be a little bit heavier, one happened to be a little bit poppier, and the other one happened to be a little bit more party.
Plus the girls, the groupies, and the secrets.
It was at the Floriat Hotel, and it was out the back.
We're talking about this, aren't we?
Yeah. And so we went out the back and we were toweling down, and, you know, there's this little kind of swimming pool in the middle of this tiny little room.
I think you got a phone call coming, Sammy.
Welcome back. There were bands in almost every pub in town, but when it came to pure rock power, no one did it like the Jets.
Peter Dean put the band together in the early 80s, and he'd seen Kiss at the Entertainment Centre, and he thought what a great idea it would be to put together a full-on rock band with a big production, big light show and pyrotechnics. So that's what he set about doing.
Yeah, their production was like, it was huge. I mean, touring acts would come in with that. They probably borrowed the gear.
It would have been louder out front than it was for us on stage. The playlist was definitely more rock and roll than your average pub band.
The Jets were probably Perth's most consistent favourite band for a long time. They played at the Raffles and that was their home, and their production was just second to none. Lighting shows, firecrackers going off, skyrockets, and those guys up there were fantastic.
It was a big show. They toured all over the place and very successfully for a number of years.
I didn't have a day job all the time the band was going, so it was great to play 3 or 4 nights a week and sleep all day. There was a lot of that.
The Jets had the power, but Perth's Kings of Pop were Perfect Strangers.
Perfect Strangers was more a haircut band, and we used to do a lot of that synthesised kind of music. Blue Monday and Frankie Goes to Hollywood and things like that. And early U2. Yeah, Perfect Strangers were a great band. I loved them.
The first time I saw Perfect Strangers, I think was at the Warwick Hotel. And there was a blonde fella up on stage, lead singer, curly hair, sang and entertained and was just vibrant. And at the end of one particular song, did backflips and just started flipping across. And I thought, that's just so cool. There's no way I'm ever going to try that.
Andrew Clayton Smith, the amazing singing, dancing, leaping acrobat. He was an acrobat, and yeah, he brought that to the stage.
Perfect Strangers, I remember playing a song of theirs back in 1985. It was called No Fear of Flying.
They also had a real chance at the big time.
Pop was fun, but when it was time to party, the Flying Fonzarellis were in a class of their own.
We put this band together quickly and then did a live lunchtime performance for some agents. Got on stage with the Blues Brothers outfits, put the sunglasses on, and to be honest with you, that's when it happened.
They were really entertaining. They were really entertaining.
The music we played could only be presented in a particular way. You played them really fast, with heaps of energy, lots of personality, and just had a good time.
Alf DeMassi, I mean, what a champion of a bloke. I just smile thinking about him.
On a Friday night, we'd be playing to over 1,000 people, up to 1,800 regularly. That's at the Overflow. At the Raffles on a Saturday, 1,500 was normal. And Sunday at the Florida, 1,200 was normal. But I think it's really important to remember that sort of you had a band and you had a social atmosphere that went together.
I can't even remember a song they played, but I can remember watching them. Do you know what I mean? It was one of those things that kind of was irrelevant what they were playing.
The thing is about the Fonzies, though, it was less Blues Brothers and more Animal House.
Those days, the way you knew who was playing was probably from the Daily News. They'd have an entertainment section and you'd look at who's playing at which pub.
On a Thursday or a Friday, and the whole middle section of the Daily News is bands and venues.
Around 83, we launched a paper, or a magazine, I suppose, and you'd probably say it was the first street press in Australia, called the 5 o'clock News.
And it came out on a Friday, and it was either black and white or red and white or blue and white. It was like one colour. And I think it was done by Joe Cipriani and those guys that went on, and it became the Express magazine.
I mean, that was a great avenue for the local entertainment to advertise.
We wanted to make it massive, as in blow the Daily News out of the water, because that's where the advertising was going.
After my glory years with V Capri, I started working with Express magazine selling advertising space. And we went out and said, look, for about $1,500, instead of getting 2 ads in the Daily News, we can give you an ad in the Daily News, we can get ads on the radio, and you can get a half a page ad on your own in Express magazine. We went out there, we sold the deal, and the Daily News went from having about 20 pages at the back down to about 2 pages, and smack in the middle of these 2 pages was a half a page ad from Express magazine with this gig guide on it saying where the bands were playing. They needed the revenue of the entertainment industry to keep going, and once that was switched to Express, that was the death of the poor old Daily News.
You.
Well, it wasn't only me. It was
You killed the boy and the dog.
I know, you all liked the Daily News, didn't you?
Every night, there were the girls, the groupies, and the secrets.
I mean, quite seriously, it was hard to go get a burger at Hungry Jack's. We were really kind of that famous, you know, and the girls followed.
In those days, every girl group had their spot on the dance floor, and if a foreign group came in and actually stood there, you could guarantee there'd be a little bit of a bitchy-pushy fight, wouldn't there?
Absolutely. That was, and I don't reckon that's changed. Last year at the Charles Hotel, I reckon it's the same thing. You know, maybe some band members did better than others, but there was a lot of girls.
Des didn't know what to do for us because we had chicks everywhere, and I remember we had this certain gig where we'd done so many gigs for the week or raised so much money for him for the week. It was at the Florette Hotel, and it was out the back.
We're talking about this, aren't we?
Yeah. And so we went out the back and we were toweling down, and you know, and there's this little kind of swimming pool in the middle of this tiny little room.
I think you got a phone call coming, Sammy.
And Des organised this busty woman to come out and roll around in this pool for us as a kind of reward. And we go, it seems a bit strange, Des, to do something like that. But anyway, she rolled around and she left.
You know, you'd go out to your car and it'd be all the lipstick, you know, things and other things. It was sort of funny, but, you know, I don't think any of us took it seriously at any stage, you know. It was just like...
Being a girl in the band, guys had lots of groupies. They had lots of groupies, fingerprints. Girls don't have groupies like guys do. You have admirers, but you don't have real die-hard groupies. You know, I found the guys in our band got the groupies still. The girls don't get groupies.
Certainly you got phone numbers thrown at you in matchboxes and you'd get back out to your car and someone worked out which car was yours and there'd be little notes under the windscreen wiper or jammed into the thing and that went along with the territory in those days, yeah.
There's always the girls that would come up and want to talk because you were the door girl and, you know, get to know more of the gossip about the guys. But no, you just keep it all in-house. You don't tell too many secrets.
Tonight we've seen the biggest and the best of Perth's pub bands, but not everyone enjoyed the spoils of success. And that's where Support Act, a foundation set up to help musicians who've fallen on hard times, comes into play. Support Act WA, in association with ProCopy, has produced a CD compilation of tracks from Perth bands of the era, many of whom you've seen tonight. It's available from any Cosmic sound outlet, or you can get it online at cosmic.com.au. It's a perfect gift for anyone who loves the sounds of the pub band era. Coming up, legendary bands and bands of legends, plus the reason why it all went away.
If you're at the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, enjoy the ride.
Nothing stays the same forever, you know?
I remember, hearing a rumour that there was this great band that had this great young guitarist in it, and you should go and see them. And I did go and see them. And to be honest, I love Mark Lazotte's playing, and he was great. But I thought Brett Keyser was outstanding. I thought he changed Perth a bit, and I thought his lyrics, his singing, his presence on stage was extraordinary. When you had Lazotte and you had Brett Keyser, that was a pretty good. Yeah, it was really good. Yeah, it was an outstanding band.
Innocent Bystanders just developed. But geez, they wrote some good stuff. Great songs.
PJ Hooker, they were probably one of the first theatrical bands in Perth. They used to play the Charles Hotel every Saturday nights.
Steve Letch was a great front man. He took on more of the David Bowie sort of vibe, which was a bit more edgy. Yeah, they were pretty awesome band and packed. You know, everywhere they played, there was a big crowd.
Ice Tiger, brilliant band.
We were playing to 1,000+ people in places like the Charles Hotel, the Generator, all those sort of places.
The screaming guitar hero and the screaming lead singer.
We could tell what the audience wanted straight away, and so we just followed what they wanted, basically.
Dave could blow your socks off.
Susie and I saw an ad in the paper for 2 backing singers, and we found out Mark Lazotte was in it, and Boyd Wilson and Dean Denton. We spoke to Peter Hayes, on the phone. Susie goes, "Oh, well, it's Denise and Susie DeMarchi. You know, we're available to do the backing singing," and we joined this band, and it was called The Kind, and that was my first band. The boys decided that, you know, because we were just singing backing vocals, we'd have one wedge, and we were up the back, and we were sharing a wage. And I don't know why we agreed to it, because our mother didn't bring us up to do things like that, but we did for about 4 weeks, and then Susie and I decided that we were doing too much work and very popular we thought we were. So we just decided, no, we want a wage each, and I think the boys agreed. We found our feet pretty quickly, Susie and I. We had a ball.
With thousands of people coming to gigs every night, there was a whole lot of money being made. But who really made it? And where did it go?
Yeah, Perth was very viable, financially back in the early 80s. Coming from Sydney, the people who made all the money were either the managers or the agents. Most of the bands, when you first started off, paid to play.
But there definitely was a lot of money around, and that the whole industry was built on that. So many people were working in the industry at that time.
You come to Perth, put a band together, the pub would pay you a retainer of $50 or $100, then you could put your own door charge on and take the whole door. And this was completely unknown anywhere else in Australia.
It was a cash gig in those days, so I think I'm talking too much out of school, but there was a certain amount that went in the pot and a certain amount that went somewhere else, and on it went.
I used to read articles in the paper about how much money we were making.
It still made a pretty good amount of money, though. I used to forget to pick up my pay.
You're doing 4 nights a week, doing capacity crowds at venues. Yeah, they made a really good living. And the people here that were looking after them, you had guys like Peter Hayes and Neil Scott and Des and those guys, they did the right thing in a lot of ways and got them to put money back in, so they're buying their own PAs and, they're shoring up their costs, etc. It became a fairly big business.
There were hundreds of bands that rocked Perth across the era, and we've shared with you just some of the stories from just some of the people that were along for the ride. Tonight we've seen how the pub band phenomenon took Perth by storm. But as the saying goes, what goes up must come down, and come down it certainly did. We'll leave you with some thoughts on why it all went away and what it was like to be part of the greatest show in Perth. I'm Dean Clares. Thanks for joining us.
Towards the end of the 80s, things started to take a dive, crowds and generally, and it was almost like the party was over somehow,
Really, I reckon the start of the decline of the music industry and the pub industry in Perth was the opening of the casino.
The girls had another place that they could actually dress up. They could put the heels on.
It was free to get in. They had entertainment. You could see the pubs slowly declining.
And then I think there was more alternatives started to happen also. I think with the America's Cup, they started doing it at Fremantle, and they had these boutique sort of breweries, and they had little duos, and it just became it became more Eastern States.
And it was something new and something different, and the people took to it. They liked it. Oh, this is cool. And then the pub scene never recovered.
Random breath testing came in, and there was much more social consciousness of drink driving.
There's no one reason for it, but I think it's just flavour of the month. If you're at the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, enjoy the ride. But at some point, it finishes. And so then you move on.
I don't think it'll ever be the same. It was a unique time and a unique set of circumstances.
Popular culture, politics, music comes in decades, Each decade has a distinctive character, and certainly 70s and 80s Perth was the pub rock time.
I don't know if there was any one factor. Things, I suppose, have a certain cycle. And then once people get out of the habit of that being their main entertainment, to go to bands, once there's other things open up, I think then it just as quickly as it built up, that's as quickly as it can fall away.
For musicians, yes, it was disappointing, but look, nothing stays the same forever,
I think the passion just sort of went out of the punters, there was a great passion, even though they were cover bands, there was a great passion amongst the followers. I think personally it just ran out of steam.
Rock and roll was good fun.
Hell yeah. It was great fun. It was awesome.
It had the most fun any one man could have.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Probably come back in 20 years' time and be on again. We won't be here though.